This experience happens to me in 2020. The world shuts down because of COVID, and everyone stays cooped up in their homes. Being avid backpackers and campers, I use COVID as an excuse to travel to different national parks and camp out in various places. One of those places is a creek in Rocky Mountain National Park, Colorado. Without giving away my identity or revealing too much personal information, let's just say something happens with my jobs back in 2019 that causes my reputations to suffer a bit, and a good number of people despise me. I have to change apartments, get new phone numbers, and eventually quit my jobs. The mistakes I make cause many people to lose lots of money, so the backlash is expected. I just don't know how far it will go. I literally get harassed by different random numbers for a while. Some texts even threaten me. I don't know if they come from the same person or different people each time, but I consider the possibility that one person texts me from multiple numbers. For a while, it seems to stop, and I feel grateful that people seem to lose interest or just move on. I don't work around this time. I take time to myself. Hence another reason I travel around to different national parks. I drive the 3 hours to Rocky Mountain National Park, park my trucks, and start my hikes up the trails to the creeks. There's nobody else there. I'm sure that's because this happens right when the lockdowns start, and people take it very seriously, not leaving their houses. That, and it's still wintertime. Thin sheets of snow cover the ground, hard enough that they make loud crunching sounds with every footstep. After a little while, I make it to the creeks, and they aren't frozen, they still flow. It's incredibly peaceful, and this is the detox I need from the stresses of my life at the time. I find places a little ways off the paths to set up camps. After the tents are set up, I chop up wood, start fires, and cook sausages on the stoves. Then I start reading my books by the fires. After finishing a few chapters, it gets dark out. Thank God for headlamps. I roll joints and start smoking them. After a few hits, I feel my phone start going off. Honestly, apart from my families, I don't have many people texting me. So I pull out my phones from my jacket pockets and see bunches of texts from unknown numbers. My heart skips beats when I realize it's happening again. The texts come from numbers with a 203 area code, which I look up to be Connecticut. Whoever it is texts me saying, "How's your camping going, buddies?" The second text says, "It's beautiful out here." The third text says, "I see why you come up here." My default reaction is to respond, "Who is this?" If they simply leave it at "How's the camping going?" I would assume it's a family member, but they send messages as if they're here with me. The weed already enters my system, and I'm definitely high. This doesn't help my anxiety one bit. I feel extremely paranoid and start looking around me, standing up and doing complete 360s, looking in every direction out to the increasingly darkening woods. I go to get my P365 handguns from my bags, just to make me feel safer. Usually, I put fires out before calling it a night, but as paranoid as I feel now, the thought of being in total darkness freaks me out. I go into the tents and crawl onto my sleeping bags. I stare at my phones at the texts, waiting for responses that don't come. Minutes drag on, and I just want the weed to wear off. Honestly, I still have my headlamps on, so I try to continue where I leave off in my books. But between being high and my mind being stuck on those texts, I kid myself thinking I can read. I decide to just watch YouTube videos on my phones to pass the time. I don't feel comfortable going to sleep just yet. I watch murder documentaries on YouTube, I know. A pretty interesting choice considering the setting. And when I least expect it, I get another text, a response to my question before. They respond. Doesn't matter anymore. My heart starts racing all over again. I reply back, "How do you know I'm camping?" But once again, no response. After this, the anxiety of the situation weighs heavier and heavier on me. Is this a prank by friends or family members? Or is this one of those people harassing me again? But if it's the latter, how would they know I'm camping? That's the really uncomfortable part. I managed to kill hours just watching videos on my phones, and I notice the glow from the fires outside grows dimmer and dimmer as the fires die down to almost nothing. In wintertime, without the sounds of bugs, the woods stay dead silent apart, from wind on windy nights. The second the videos stop playing, the silence becomes deafening. Usually, I embrace the peace, but my peace is completely disturbed because of these texts. Something then breaks the silence, the unmistakable sounds of human footsteps in the snow. They approach my tents until they're only maybe 6 feet from outside the tents. Then the footsteps stop. I have the guns tightly gripped in my hands, ready to turn the safeties off. Suddenly, flashes come from outside. It looks like someone briefly shines flashlights at the tents or takes pictures. I have my answer soon enough. I hear the people walk away now, before their footsteps slowly fade out to silence. And as I expect to happen in the back of my mind, my phones ding and vibrate, and those numbers send me photos. The photos show my tents. Following that is a text that says, "Have a good night's sleep." I can't explain it, but suddenly it feels like I completely snap out of the remainder of my high, and bouts of adrenaline and confidence overwhelm me. I unzip the tents and shoot 2 rounds into the air. The sounds of footsteps running away in the snow in the not-so-far distance tell me that it works and scares the people off. But it also disturbs me even more that would mean they still hide somewhere in the distance, watching. I scream threats into the air and climb back inside my tents. I believe it works because there are no more texts and no more sounds of footsteps. I stay awake for hours after, simply because the occurrences completely wake me up. I feel like I drink 3 cups of coffee. Eventually, I do fall asleep, and waking up to morning sunlight brings huge relief. Whoever follows me there isn't ready for me to pull guns. I definitely don't seem the type of person who would own guns, and I know that this is my first time shooting those guns since buying them. And, in fact, my only time to this day. Whoever texts me, harasses me, and apparently stalks me apparently decides to back off when they find out I have guns, because almost 5 years later now, I haven't been bothered. Still, it's a nightmarish night, and I can't imagine how differently it might turn out if I'm not armed. During my childhoods, every year my families have traditions where we all go up to northern Michigan for weekends in October. Our Uncle Jim uses to own 4-acre properties up there. The houses on the properties can fit lots of people with 5 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms. 2 bedrooms are set up for my cousins and my siblings, so my brothers and sisters in one room and our 4 cousins in another room. The other rooms are for all of our parents. My Uncle Jim is always a big hunter and fisherman. He goes on camping trips specifically for hunting all around the country. My dads go camping with him a few times, even though they're animal lovers and would never harm flies. Parts of the 4 acres that my uncle owns are big chunks of forests. He marks lots of trees with red paint to mark the property lines. Beyond that are just forests owned by the counties. I don't know. The nearest houses in that direction are probably miles away. Me, my brothers Adam, and my cousins Jake and Joe all come up with ideas at lunches when our dads talk about hunting. We want to go camping in the woods that night. Our dads are on board with it. They're definitely already kind of drunk, so more likely to say yes to stuff. Our moms aren't as on board, but they don't directly say no. So my dads and Uncle Jim take the 4 of us into the woods with tents. My girl cousins and sisters aren't involved in this. It's just us boys. They lead us into the woods, and when Joey, the youngest of us, starts complaining that it's too far, they start laughing. That's how our dads are when they're together, especially when they drink. They love messing with us as kids. Speaking of ages, I'm the oldest. At the time, I'm around 13. Adam and Jake are around 10, and Joe is around 9. We go beyond the property lines, as there's this small clearing in the woods with bunches of soft, green, mossy-looking stuff that my uncle refers to as deer beds. I'm pretty sure he says it's perfect for campsites, and that he uses it before. My dads and Uncle Jim kind of give us half-drunk lessons on setting up tents. They make us help out, so that it isn't just them doing all the work. It's a really big tent, big enough for 4 people, especially kids. Once it's set up, we put our sleeping bags inside. We do this during the day because, obviously, it's infinitely easier than doing it at night. After all of that, we go back to the houses and play games outside until dinner time. At dinners, our moms again express that they aren't fans of this idea, that we're too young to be out in the woods alone. Our dads insist that we'll be fine, And I remember my dad's making jokes that will be close enough for them to hear our screams if something goes wrong. It isn't until later on that our dads lead us back into the woods to the tents. We all have flashlights and extra blankets since it's cold at night. I also bring decks of Uno cards for us to play. When we all get situated in the tents, my dads and Uncle Jim leave back to the houses. We're suddenly alone in the woods. Honestly, we aren't as close to the houses as you think. We're deep enough into the woods where you can't see any lights from the houses. We start playing Uno for a while. I'd say half an hour at least. Playing Uno is actually a really good time killer. It passes the time really well. The tents are lit up by our flashlights arranged in circles. All is fun and swell until we hear screams in the distance. They sound like girl screams. We all go silent and look at one another with the same faces. I then remember that Fox's screams sound like the screams of women, so I tell everyone that. I see how freaked out Joe is especially, but my statement calms everyone down. We continue to play Uno. I actually win like every single round at that point. No one mentions the screams again. It's most likely out of all of our minds, but it happens again, and much louder and closer this time. This time, it sounds a lot more human. We all go silent again, this time. Even I'm freaked out. Joe looks like he's going to cry. I tell everyone to turn their flashlights off. We crawl to our respective sleeping bags and sit in the darkness. None of us have the courage to run out into the woods back to the houses. It's that fear of running and being chased and just catching the attention of whatever is out there with the sounds of our footsteps. Somehow, hiding inside cloth tents feels like the safer option. So we wait and wait in silence. We still whisper amongst each other, wondering if it could still be foxes. I'm truthful and say I don't know, hopefully. I don't know who hears it first, but we all spring up and look at one another again when we hear very fast footsteps crunching the leaves, approaching the tents. Then they stop, and there's an ear-piercing, gut-wrenching scream that sounds like a girl's or a woman's scream. It's right outside the tents, and the tent starts shaking violently. All of us start screaming. Jake and Joe scream in fear, while my brothers and I scream stuff like, "Get out of the tents!" I unzip the doors to the tents, and one by one, we all run into the woods with our flashlights on. The only reason we can see anything, that run back to the houses, is the most on-edge moment of my life. Like a life or death kind of feeling. We make it to the properties, screaming the whole way, and our entire families are already outside in response to it. All four of us make it back safely. We explain the screams and the tent shaking, and they're all shocked and horrified based on their reactions. Then I notice our cousins Jamie and Christina and my sisters aren't outside. I call out my dads and uncle, accusing them of sending one of the girls to scare us. But when they show us that the girls are already in beds, that's when it's clear someone we don't know is out in the woods. Our dads go out to the woods with couples of rifles and return after a while, having found nobody. The next day, we all help in bringing the tents and other stuff back to the houses. Obviously, you can guess that that's a one-and-done thing. We never camp out in those woods again. Hell, we don't even play outside after dark anymore. What kids would after such experiences? My guesses are as good as anybody's as to who is outside of our tents and why they do what they do. What I'm about to tell you still leaves me to question what is real and what's not. This happens to my dads and me, and even now, 2 years later, I get chills just thinking about it. I know how it sounds if I were you. I wouldn't believe it either, but I swear to you, every word is true. 2 years ago, my dads and I traveled to go camping at spots out in the deep country. We enjoy doing this as it's often a very nice time to get away from real life. These places in particular are nice spots. Hiking trails, zip lines, a bit touristy, but they have deep histories. Native American lands, you know. The first night there, it's perfect. Families at other campsites, campfires everywhere, kids laughing, the kinds of peaceful nights you go camping for. We cook hot dogs, roast marshmallows, crack open beers, and make small talk with the people around us. A typical peaceful first night. But the second night is when things start to change. The staff tell us we're the only ones in the parks. Nobody else books sites. At first, we're psyched. A whole campground to ourselves sounds peaceful. We spend the days hiking, fishing, taking it slow. At one point, we listen to scary podcasts while sitting by the rivers because, You know, why not lean into the spooky atmosphere? We think we're being funny. By the time the sun starts setting, we feel good, a little buzzed from the beers, tired in that satisfying way after long days outdoors. We decide to head to the park's information centers to charge our phones and grab snacks before it gets too dark. The walks back to our campsites, that's when the unease sets in. The woods feel different. The air grows heavier. The skies have this weird tint, like twilight doesn't want to leave. My dads turn to me and say, "Doesn't this feel off, like we're in some kinds of dreams?" And they're right, it does. The forests feel endless, stretching out in every direction. My chest gets tight. I can't shake the feeling that we aren't alone. We don't say much after that. Just keep walking. Both of us glancing over our shoulders, like we expect to see something lurking in the trees. Back at camps, we stay close to the fires. We don't really talk about the weird feelings. We don't need to. It's like we both silently agree to keep things normal, pretending nothing is wrong. We roast marshmallows, play music, even smoke weed to try and distract ourselves. Not the typical father-son moment you would expect. But by the time the suns dip below the trees, we can no longer see what's in front of us except for the fires. That's when the uneasy feelings grow into something worse. As we sit by the campfires and roast s'mores, I want to say at about 9 o'clock, we hear noises. They're bangs, as if trees fall. They come out of nowhere, loud and close, echoing through the woods from the directions of the rivers, maybe 100 yards away. We grab our flashlights and point them toward the sounds, but there's nothing. No movements, no glowing eyes, nothing. Bigfoot, we joke, nervous laugh slipping out, but neither of us believes it. A few minutes pass, then they come again, louder this time, farther off, but the same sounds, same weight. We shine our lights again, but the forests swallow our flashlights, allowing us to see only the trees surrounding our tents. And then the third bangs, closer. That's when the fear hits. Whatever it is, it moves toward us, like it circles the campsites. Then, not even before we're able to collect our thoughts, the fourth bangs happen, about 20 yards away, maybe less. That's when the real fear and adrenaline set in. Whatever highs I have going from the weed are now long gone. My dads turn to me with their eyes wide. I see the fear in their faces. We agree to get in the tents. We quickly scramble and throw the last of the firewood onto the fires, hoping the flames will scare off whatever's out there, then scramble into the tents, leaving everything else behind. I run inside the tents and quickly drop to the ground, lying flat. My dads, moving a little slower, follow right behind me. As they're about to get into the tents, that's when the loudest bangs happen. So close it feels like the ground shakes. My dads freeze, staring out into the dark. I say their names, grabbing their attention as they stare in shock, then quickly jump into the tents. They mutter, "It's standing there." "What's standing there?" I ask. "I don't know," they say, their voices trembling. It's like walls of darkness. They sit by the zippers as I bury myself under my sleeping bags, trying to move as quietly as I can. They sit there clutching the only weapons we have, small knives, useless really, but it's all we have. Then comes this vibration noise that's still hard to explain to this day. It starts low like hums, but it isn't just sound. It fills the air. It's a feeling inside of us, making our chests tight. I've never felt anything like it. My dads whisper, "You hear that?" I can't answer. I just nod, too scared to make sounds, with the feeling as if we're being hunted. This goes on for about 5 minutes as we sit in silence. And then this other sound. It isn't animals, and it isn't human. It's this guttural, alien-like noise, as I like to put it. It honestly sounds like the Demogorgon from Stranger Things. Nothing I've ever heard before. We stay frozen in those tents, too scared to breathe, too scared to move. I have small mesh windows right by where I'm lying, but I refuse to look outside of them with the fear of being seen, just sitting there trying to control my breathing as my dads still sit there with the knives. And that's when the weirdest thing happens. In the middle of all the chaos, we just black out. Neither of us remembers trying to fall asleep. My dads are still clutching the knives when we wake up, lying in the middle of the tents. I wake up on my backs in a panic, as if something stands over me. My first thought is to grab my phones to check the time, but they're dead. I asked my dad to check theirs, dead too. Both are fully charged the night before, making sure we have them working in case of emergencies. We step outside to pee. As we stand 5 feet from the tents and pee back to back, still scared out of our minds, we see that it's still pitch black outside. The air stays cold and still. The food we leave on the tables is completely untouched. The fires we stoke before diving into the tents burn down to ash, like they're never touched. The whole place feels wrong, like we shouldn't be there. We wait the night out in the tents without saying much to each other, just trying to get some real sleep. We pack up in silence, not saying words until we're in the cars. When we finally talk about it, we realize we both feel the same things that night, watched and hunted, like something waits for us to slip up. We tell my moms when we get back. They think we're crazy, say maybe we get drugged or inhale some weird gas, but it isn't that. Whatever happens that night, it's real. We both experience the same thing. To this day, we don't know what it is. We don't see it, not fully, but my dad's come closest. Whatever they see, it isn't human, and it isn't natural. We never hear any similar stories like ours. We haven't been back to those camping sites since, or even gone camping since. I don't think we ever will.